This is the Vic Feazell Show podcast, sponsored by Moroso Wood-Fired Pizzeria, Pinewood Coffee Roasters, and the law offices of Vic Feazell.
Question for you, Lynn. So, did Hugh Ainsworth, did he just come up and start talking to you about the Lucas matter? I mean, how did he jump to that? Was that just his thing at that time?
I never talked to Ainsworth about that, but I followed news stories. I wrote this chapter. I had Carlton Stowers' book too. I had stacks of newspaper clippings, and then I had my own interviews that I had done when I was in Waco, and of course I was there when Robert Weathers called me into that office. So I knew some of those things that had gone on. To this day, I probably have a number of file folders chocked full of all that stuff.
Wow. You weren't the only one who was told to find something on me, and other people were threatened even to tell me something on Vic Feazell, threatened by the feds, threatened by IRS. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a weird time. It was like the Joe McCarthy communist hunt, but I was the only commie in town.
Well,
it was crazy. I mean, the whole wrath of the government coming down on me when I was just trying to do what was right.
And there was a weird connection there. I had worked at Channel 8, but I had not worked for Channel 8. Back in those days, Belo Broadcasting, which was right next door to the Dallas Morning News, had three stations. They had WFAA TV, Channel 8. The only thing I ever did for them was interview shows. And then upstairs was WFAA 570, which is now Cliff. And then we had WFAA FM, The Velvet Sound, which later became KZEW, which was one of the nation's pioneering alternative type stations when they brought in a couple of guys from Detroit to do that. But when I went to work there, weirdly enough, one of the main TV anchors was a guy named Don Harris. Now, I never met Don Harris. I probably saw him in the hall. We were upstairs. TV was downstairs. TV, of course, being TV, had high ceilings and lights, and I could walk outside the radio studio. There was a aisle to get down to the stairs, and all that was glassed in, and you could watch the TV shows being made. Mr. Peppermint for kids, and 6 and 10 o'clock news and all that. Well, one of the main anchors was a guy named Don Harris, and that may not ring a bell, but it is about to. There was a guy named Jim Jones who had a cult down in Guyana, where we got the term "don't drink the Kool-Aid."
Yeah, and Henry said he drove the Kool-Aid down there for him.
Yeah, unbelievable. Well, when that congressman was killed, Ryan, wasn't that his name?
I think so, yes.
When that congressman was killed, a news reporter was also murdered, an NBC News reporter, and that was Don Harris.
Wow.
So that's my tenuous connection to that.
Wow.
I can't say I really knew Don Harris. Don was there with another couple of guys, and I can't really put together their names. One of them went on to become a main reporter for 2020. Channel 8 produced, everybody that worked for him went to the networks eventually, most of the time. But right about the time you were about to run for DA, they brought in what I call the woman who could have been Oprah, Iola Johnson. Iola Johnson was a very attractive and very talented black woman who became the first African-American female anchor in Dallas.
Yeah, I remember
think
her.
she was before Clarice Tinsley, who's still there after 40 years. And Iola Johnson, she was the talk of the town. Have you seen this black woman read the news? She's really good, Of course, this was the 80s. And attitudes were still forming in those days about issues of race. I just looked at her and said, this woman's good, just period. Her skin color notwithstanding, she was just talented. And then to pair up with her, they brought in a guy named Tracy Rowlett.
Yeah.
And Tracy was there for a long time till there were some network affiliation changes, and Fox bought Channel 4 and changed it to Fox, and Tracy and Iola ended up going to Channel 11, which became the new CBS affiliate. Well, weirdly enough, about this time, I was a board member of an organization called the Bell County Communications Club or something like that. And we had an annual award ceremony, and I knew Tracy Rowlett, and everybody said, get Tracy to come be the keynote speaker. So I called Tracy. I think we did this at the Stagecoach Inn in Salado or somewhere. Anyway, Tracy and I had lunch at the Stagecoach Inn in Salado, and we discussed this deal with you and Henry Lee Lucas and Charles Duncan, the guy that they
So Duncan had already done his series on me.
He was in the middle of it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I remember both of us decided it would probably be best not to discuss that too much.
Yeah, because you had already been given that assignment, get Vic Feazell.
Oh, that was over with. I was
way
out of there
over
by that
out
time.
of
Yeah.
But then Duncan was given that assignment, and man, he embraced it.
Yeah, and as I wrote in the book, there was a big difference. You know, I came in the morning at 5:30. I had to go through the Waco Trib, see what was going on, rewrite some of their stuff so it didn't sound like we were plagiarizing them. Call a few people, record a couple of newscasts, do the AM newscast, do the FM newscast, write all the comedy routines. I mean, it was just a few little things I had to do in the morning. And then do some of the bits with Cannon. And by, say, 10 o'clock in the morning, I had 2 hours then after the morning drive was over. And I would usually get in the car, and I used to tell Cannon, I love the brand of tires they put on this car. They had 4 Maypops on it. And I told Weathers, I said, they may pop at any moment.
Maypops. I like that.
And he finally put a new set of tires on because he got worried that he would get sued if the tires blew out. I mean, this is how cheap that place was at the time. It was exceedingly cheap. And I would go down and cover the commissioner's court or cover City Hall or something like that and file a story and go home. I didn't have time to go to file a public information request and start rifling through police records. I didn't have time to do that. I have done it. I know how to do it, but there was just no time. And we weren't a real serious news organization. And there was maybe 2 of us in the news department. And Charles Duncan worked for an organization that if he would go and say, hey, I can sniff out a story that's going to win us a Katie. Remember that was the big award in Dallas? I actually won one of those.
I have one in the next room over there.
Outstanding.
Carlton Stowers gave me the one he won.
Oh, cool.
He wanted me to have it.
Yeah, she's a statue of a girl in which when I displayed mine at my work, the female employees made a nice little bikini for her and put it on her because they thought she was too voluptuous for the
holding
office.
a plate in front of her. It has a D in it, I think.
Yes, it has a D in it.
Press Club.
Exactly.
Yeah. He won that award for the article he wrote for D Magazine called War in Waco.
Wow.
About this.
That's cool. Well, I won mine for a long documentary on male rights in a child custody case after a divorce. It's something that, as a lawyer, you would probably love. And do I have a copy of it? Of course.
Yeah.
I have a copy of it, but I don't have a reel-to-reel player that works.
Oh, jeez.
But so essentially, I had been out of the picture for a little while when I found out that Duncan had been snooping around, and I don't know how long he had, but if he went back and told Channel 8, I think there's a story here and we could win an award with it and make us look good and we can promote it, they would give him not only time, but a staff. Now, a beat reporter, like Channel 8's education reporter or their federal reporter or their City Hall reporter, had to file a story every day. Duncan didn't have to file a story every day. He could spend 3 or 4 weeks down here in Waco digging.
And he did. Yeah.
And then go back up to Dallas and put it together. And
Yeah.
he could do a bunch of interviews. He didn't have to file a report for the news that night.
And he had Larry Scott with his Waco police helping him.
Yep.
And he had Colonel Jim Adams with the DPS, the state police, helping him. I sued Channel 8 over all of that. Gary Richardson represented me. I did all the paperwork, the pleadings, all that. Gary tried it to the jury. We won the largest libel verdict in the history of the United States. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records.
And not only that, you did something I didn't think was possible. You and I are both public figures.
Yes.
Public figures have hell with that.
Yes,
And
you have to prove malice.
You have to prove malice, and it's got to be really, really bad.
Yeah.
And
we proved every single thing they said
And
was an absolute lie.
and you did. I remember writing a letter to the court.
Yes, you did.
explaining about that day I was called in
Yes, you did.
and what happened. It was, there's a difference in spending your time on a story and coming up with a great story and spending your time with a story and not finding all the facts and reporting the story that you thought it was going to be anyway. And I'll give you, I know you're not political right now, but I'll give you a current example. And you may throw me off the podcast, but
we just delete it out.
the whole Russia thing, CNN, night after night after night for 2 years, said that all these things had happened, that they had proof that they could do all this. Mueller investigates, spends $16 million, has an unlimited staff of mostly Democratic attorneys doing the investigation for him, and he came up with nothing.
All 2 years, he came up with nothing. So, it's a good thing I didn't watch it.
But here, but no, look, I've got lots of problems with Trump, although I voted for him and will vote for him again, because I think he's done a good job as president. His personal style is not my personal style. I like class. I like integrity. I like honesty. I like truth. These are things that
I agree.
Trump will, he's liable to say anything at any time.
Yeah.
But the economy is pretty damn good.
That's
you got to
true.
admit that.
That's true.
Somebody had to take on China. Nobody else was going to do it.
Yeah.
And China's
I don't know
stealing is
enough
blind.
about that.
And so, we'll the trade war being the trade war, you've just, no other president was willing politically to try it. But notwithstanding that, when Duncan, and I'm assuming, I don't know because I'm not privy to his innermost thoughts or any of his file folders or his notepads, but I'm assuming that he didn't really find anything and decided, well, there's enough people that don't like Vic Feazell that we can make this work anyway, and he went forward with it, and that was his mistake. There is a time when you either change the story to be the story of how the establishment got sideways with Vic Feazell, or there's a time at which you say, this story isn't worth pursuing, but the end that we envisioned is not there.
Right. I was able to do a lot of discovery in the Below case. I got no discovery in the criminal case. I was looking at 80 years, and we went in blind. You don't get anything. But if you sue somebody, man, you can look up their butt with a microscope,
Discovery is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, so we were able to get all that discovery and piece these things together. And how did this happen? I said in a deposition one time that the slimy trail of the serpent has become visible, and it leads back to the desk of Jim Adams. and it does.
Remember that club I told you I was a part of? The Bell County Communications Club. It's had different. It still exists, by the way. Now it's called Bell Communicators. At that time, it was.
I think I spoke to him once.
I asked you to speak.
Okay.
And I'll never forget. I don't remember a lot about what you said. It was boilerplate, and it was your standard speech about this. But we were in the Holiday Inn on I-35, and the immediate exit to get off the highway there was Adams Avenue. And you said, I can't believe I'm speaking at a place that's right off of Adams Avenue.
Yeah. Actually, I was invited back to that same hotel to speak, I think, to the Lions Club a few months later. And while I was driving down, I heard on the radio that Jim Adams had just announced his resignation. And so when I stood up to that group, I said, I'm really happy to be talking to you guys here at the Adams exit.
The Adams exit. Yeah, that's pretty funny. And there were so many ironies in this thing. So many weirdisms like that.
We were the good guys in the 80s, man. Both of us. We stood up for what was right. I was standing up to the Texas Rangers and Colonel Jim Adams and your boss, Robert Weathers, and city manager David Smith and Larry Scott, the police chief, and all those guys.
And I was in the middle of a 22-year stint working for Marie Osmond and John Schneider doing Children's Miracle Network.
Holy cow.
In this market, not nationally.
Wow.
In this market.
Wow.
Those were fun days.
And then you lost your job because you were willing to stand up for what was right and not go out and do something that went against your conscience. Robert Weathers told you to find something on me. And that was an order. And you actually even made somewhat of an attempt.
I snooped around.
You snooped. You know, you could have done better than Dan Weinberg and Betty Denton if
I
you
could've-
really wanted to find something, because they're both really nice people.
You might be catching on to my methodology there. I didn't, and to this day do not like it. If I'm in legitimate news and somebody tells me to go do a certain story with a certain ending on that story, go cover the car wreck down on the interstate is different from let's get Vic Feazell.
Yeah.
That's a very different thing.
It really is, and that's one of the things I respect about you, Lynn. You have a backbone, and you had a backbone then, and you stood up for and did the right thing, even though you suffered for it. You became. What was the euphemism? Between jobs.
Yeah, that's a euphemism that I'm kind of experiencing at the moment. But it was a no-brainer to me. I was not going to do somebody else's dirty work. If he wanted to do that, he can go out and investigate himself. But it was something where I felt like if I was going to maintain any integrity as a newscaster, forget the comedy routines that we were doing on the side. Those were different, separate, and a whole different animal when you're doing FM entertainment as to when you're on an AM station and you're running hourly and half-hourly newscasts that people trust you to be factual. To this day, I've done a lot of talk shows. I've done 25 years of conservative political talk on the radio. And when I say, here's an electricity company that's going to be able to save you money, I want people to say, Lynn Woolley said that, therefore I should call them.
Right.
So if you don't have that kind of reputation, there are times I've said, you can advertise on my show. I'd let anybody advertise on my show that had a legal product. But if I didn't like the product and I thought it was subpar, I didn't put my voice on it. If my voice is on that product, that's me backing it. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, for example, I don't believe much in vaping. I would not do a vaping commercial. Too many people are getting sick off of it.
Oh, man, aren't they? Yeah, don't do that, guys.
So, no, that's not a good thing.
It's better than being arrested in a hotel, but it's better if you don't have to take the chance.
Exactly. And so, it's one of those things where I told Steve Cannon in the car going home, the chances of me doing this are not good. So I said, you might as well prepare yourself in case we have the wrath of Robert Weathers. And would you like to know how we were fired?
Yeah.
It was typical Robert Weathers.
Yeah.
It was done while he was out of town.
Oh, wow.
There was a guy named, I want to say Howard Lane. He was a nice guy, big voice, small guy, big, huge radio voice. And he went by the name on air of Dave Duquesne. And that's what I remember him as. But I think his real name was Howard. And 5 o'clock, 5:15, we come trotting in to do our regular thing, and he meets us at the back door where the employees
5:30 in the morning.
5:30 in the
So
morning.
they let you drive from Temple,
he
get
let
up
us drive.
early in the morning, drive all the way to Temple
Exactly.
to meet you at the
All
back
the way to
door.
Waco, actually,
I mean, to
from
Waco,
Temple.
from Temple. Meet you at the back door and fire you up 5:30 a.m.
And Dave is all, he's obviously had an anxious night, and he's nervous. And he says, guys, I'm sorry. Robert says, you don't work here anymore.
Dave Duquesne.
Dave Duquesne.
Howard.
That was his air name.
Howard,
nice guy.
Howard Duquesne.
And I looked over at Cannon, and he looked at me, and we smiled, and neither one of us really gave a crap.
Really?
It was like not the best place we'd ever worked. The drive at that time of the morning was really tough. And Cannon was if he was addicted to anything in his life, it was fishing. And so he said, well, let's go out to Caney Park or Spiegelville Park or somewhere. There was a bass tournament going on. And he said, we'll just watch the sun come up, and then we'll go see Vic.
Oh, wow.
That's
what the Apostle Peter did when he thought his world had crumbled. He said, I go a-fishing.
Yeah. So
right after Jesus was pronounced dead, I go a-fishing.
We went out and just watched the sun come up.
Yeah.
And when the sun came up, that would have been a little after, probably around 7 o'clock, we headed back down and headed for the courthouse. Came into your office.
Came to see me. I remember that. I remember that meeting. I was shocked.
And I believe if you think back hard, and I'm trying to think hard on that, I don't think either one of us were all that upset. We were tired of working for Robert Weathers. We were tired of the drive. We were tired of the 6 days a week. I need to tell you about day 6. because on the 6th day we cooked. But we were tired of working for far less money than we made in Temple. And I believe my annual pay for Robert was $18,000 a year. Now, that doesn't sound like much now. It wasn't much then either. It was a lot more then than it is now.
It's more than it is now. But it wasn't a lot then.
But it was not great.
No.
And, it was one of those deals where I didn't want to get revenge on Robert. I just was happy to get away from him. And that's how I got into the advertising agency business. On the way home, Steve Cannon and I, we had been doing production on the side. Now, production, you'll know what I'm talking about. We would pick up an account here and there, and we'd do their commercials for them. And we'd been having some of our clients say, well, if you can do our radio commercials, can you do our TV commercials? And so we started edging into that. And then they would say, well, can you do our media placement? Can you do our newspaper? So we ended up hiring a graphic artist. This is in the days when you did that with an X-Acto knife and border tape and stuff like that. You didn't do it. You didn't do it with a computer yet.
No, they didn't have computers.
That was still years to come. And we changed the name of our company, which we had called Production Plus, which was limited to production, and we just changed it to Cannon and Woolley and became an advertising agency. And I've been in that business off and on ever since.
Good.
I've directed thousands of TV commercials. Thank you, Robert Weathers, for firing me.
Thank you, Robert.
But and then later, as that radio station we had applied for drug on in the courts, Cannon and I were offered a job by Ken Williams, another guy from this area, who Cannon had known through fishing. Well, he had bought KTON in Belton, AM and FM, and he changed the FM to Q106, and we took all our characters there and continued the same show. The problem with that station, it had 960 watts of power. 960 watts of power. KIXS in Killeen, which was our competitor, had 100,000 watts of power.
Right. Yeah, 960 is a whisper.
Cannon and I are responsible, and I feel bad to this day. I really feel bad. We were responsible for the firings of our morning crew because we destroyed them. 950 watts, and we destroyed them. And we did it with our comedy routines and our characters.
Wow, man. That's incredible.
So I didn't really suffer too much.
That's incredible. Well, you guys were just great. You were so entertaining.
And Steve Cannon now is the director of Bell County Jail Ministries.
Yes, I know that. It's a great ministry.
A great ministry.
Good ministry to support.
He's a great Christian guy, and still love him to death. And one of these days it'd be fun to do a reunion.
That'd be good. I would love it. I'd love it. I'd pay to see you guys. I mean, listening to you guys was kind of like listening to Tuna, Texas. You know the play?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it reminded me of the
Except
characters.
the radio station call letters were not KKK.
Yeah, right.
Wasn't that the
Oh,
call?
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking. So,
Yeah.
that's...
And then they start reading some bad news about something, and they go, oh, wait a minute. That's not Texas. Never mind.
That was a funny play.
I saw that play. I saw it live at least 8 or 10 times when I was living in Austin. I love those guys. The first time I ever saw it, I was in San Francisco for a conference. I think this was the late 80s. It was before they got famous in their hometown of Austin. And they were in a tiny little theater with maybe 100 seats in it. You had to go upstairs. And I saw this thing, Tuna, Texas, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I'll buy a ticket. And I went and saw it right there in San Francisco before they got famous in hometown Austin.
How'd they do with their Texas accents?
They were great. These were exaggerated accents, but that's what made them funny.
Oh yeah,
yeah, kind of like you in Cannon. Yeah. So anyway, I was telling you in all the discovery, we figured out that there was this connection between Robert Weathers and David Smith, who was the city manager, and David Smith and Larry Scott, who was chief of police, and Larry Scott and Bill Johnston. Bill Johnston had worked for me at one time and then became the legal assistant for the police department and was Larry Scott's guy. So we found out that connection through that, and they were wanting to get Vic Feazell because that was coming from Colonel Jim Adams to David Smith. They were close personal friends. And also, Tom Pauken comes into play here. Tom Pauken is the one who actually got Charles Duncan in on this. Jim Adams approaches Pauken. Pauken had been big in the Republican Party. You can probably tell us more about Pauken than what I know. But he had been sort of this head of this America Volunteers.
It was called the Action Agency.
Action Agency, yeah, some kind of domestic volunteer program. But he basically ran errands for the big guys in the Republican Party, and it was kind of powerful and did this kind of dirty work for people. And he's the one who made the arrangements to put Charles Duncan from Channel 8 in the Ramada Inn room in Waco, Texas, along with Ron Border.
You're making me feel so guilty.
Ron Border, I know, because you're the one who got
Pauken
here.
He was here. That's right.
Yeah, it all hatched out of that meeting at the Ramada Inn.
Well, I'll tell you that story. Somebody at KRLD in Dallas, where I had done mornings with Frank Gleber, who was paired with Dick Vermeil, Frank Gleber and Dick Vermeil on NFL on CBS. Brad Sham was there, Dick Wheeler in the morning. We had a lot of really famous people on the air, and I worked on the mornings there as well. Pauken decided he wanted to go to Austin and buy a radio station. All right, so KLBJ at that time was the big radio station in Austin.
Right.
And it was owned by Lady Bird.
Yeah, LBJ, Lyndon Baines
widow.
Johnson. Yeah.
And at that time, it was, I think it was already KLBJ. It had been KDBC, but they spun off the television station, and it kept the KTBC call letters, which stood for Texas Broadcasting Company. And so they had to recall letter KTBC radio, and it became KLBJ. So that's a little of the background there. But KLBJ is a 5,000 watt radio station on 590, and that is significant. If you know anything about AM radio, the further to the left of the dial you go, the longer, I believe, the waves, whatever. Anyway, it goes out further. If you so a station with the same power on 590 and up on 1580, say the old KRZI, they could have the same power. The one down on 590 is going to have 10 times the coverage. And that's just the way the radio waves work. On
so the
AM.
Station on the far left would have less coverage than the station on the far.
No, farther left on the dial, the more coverage.
The more coverage,
right? That's why WBAP in Dallas at 820 covers 48
So
states.
if you're the last station on the left, you got the most coverage.
That would be 540. Yeah.
Okay.
So they were at 590 at 5,000 watts. That's the equivalent of a 50,000 watt station, which is maximum power, because the signal just booms out. The station that Pauken had been offered was KTXZ, up around 1560 or something. And it had the same power, maybe even a little bit more than KLBJ. But KLBJ's signal coverage was far more.
Right.
And the other thing that was interesting about that, KTXZ, or K-Texas as it was known, that was owned by a local advertising agency owner named Neil Spells. Well, remember, I'd just gotten involved in the agency business.
I remember Neil Spells.
Spells was the guy who did on-scene reports when Charles Whitman was shooting from the UT
Yes,
tower.
he was, yeah.
All right, so
he was
Spells,
the face of Austin News.
He was. And then later, he had the biggest ad agency in Austin. And
Yes,
then
he did.
GSD&M came in
Yes.
and took over that, and he lost the Texas account.
Tim McClure, yeah.
Tim McClure and Roy Spence and that bunch
Yeah.
at GSD&M, Judy
Good bunch of
Trabulsi
guys.
and all those. And Spence's agency lost a couple of big accounts. He was up on about the 20th floor of the one of the big bank buildings when the skyscrapers were first started to be built in downtown Austin. And we went up there. Pauken picked me up at my house in Temple. We went up to see Spells. Spells, by the way, after his agency sort of went south on him, went back to Channel 7, KDBC TV, and
Right.
became a news anchor again.
Right.
So Spells said, well, let's go see the station. So we go over to Westlake, and we looked at the station. It was okay. I mean, nothing spectacular, nice facility, nothing bad. And then said, well, we'll take you out and show you the transmitter site. Well, there's a little thing, there's an old saying that says less is more. In AM radio, it really is. if you've got one tower in AM radio, that's called a non-directional signal, and it shoots the signal out, and most of AM radio comes out of the ground, not off the tower. Some of it comes off the tower, but most of it comes out of what are called radials that are buried under the ground and all attached to your transmitter or your tower. We get out there and we find out that KTXZ has got 9 towers, I believe it was. Well, the more towers, the worse. 9 is a lot. Those towers are there for the express purpose of the signal bumping into each other and creating a null. That's an FCC term called a null. And the reason you need to create nulls is because somebody else has that frequency somewhere. And you can't. So
it's like a governor on a car.
It's like a governor on a car. Well, what's worse, the transmitter site was an old landfill. The ground system for those 9 towers, some of it was exposed, sticking up out of the ground. It was awful. And Spels did not try to hide it. He said, "Yeah, we bury these cables and we have to come out and relay them and all."
They leach back up.
It was bad.
Yeah.
On the way back home, I told Pauken, I said, "This physically is a bad facility. It's not on a par with KLBJ. Lady Bird is a very wealthy woman. She's very prestigious in Austin. She's got what we call in the business a heritage station. She's got a pair of call letters nobody in Austin can ever forget, KLBJ. And she's going to kill you." And I said, "I don't know about it." Well, Pauken was dead set on doing it. The other thing Pauken noticed about me was how interested I was in Spels's ad agency. Well, I had just opened one with Steve Cannon. I was very interested in learning how he
learn
did
everything you can.
And ask him a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And so when I declined to go to work for Pauken to do this station, he accused me of welshing on an agreement. Well, we had nothing written down. I'd said I would look at it, and I've always loved Austin as a city. It's a beautiful city.
Sure.
It was about half the size then or less than it is now.
Yeah, and just doing your due diligence.
You could drive from east to west Austin, in 20 minutes in those days.
Yeah, you could.
Which you can't do anymore.
No.
And I just
That's why I moved.
I said, "Neil," because he knew nothing about radio. I tried to explain the right side, left side of the dial thing, because he could hear the station on his radio. He didn't see any difference. I said, "Well, drive out of town, get to Temple."
You talking to Pauken?
To Pauken, I'm sorry. Yeah, to Pauken. I said, "Take a listen to KLBJ. You won't notice any difference in Temple or Waco than you do in Austin. Take a listen to K-Texas. It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone when you get out of Austin." And I said, "It's just going to be at night. You got nothing because you have to lower the power at night, and you can't power up till sunrise." I said, "Lady Bird's going to kill you. It won't work." Well, he was mad. And then I had a friend in Waco named Van Goodall. I'm sure you know Van.
I know the name.
Van owned 1580 KRZI, and I knew that Van was kind of thinking about selling it. So I wrote a letter. This seems weird today, but I actually sat down and wrote a letter, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and sent it to Pauken.
It's the way we did things back then.
It's the way we did things.
That's how you got work done.
We didn't have email. We didn't have email.
Yeah,
All
everything was like high touch. No high tech. High touch.
So the letter was something to the effect of, "Dear Tom, look, I'm really sorry about this thing in Austin. I didn't think I could do it because I don't think it will work, and I think you would have wasted your money, and you would essentially," I didn't probably say it this way, "you would have lost your ass. There is a small station in Waco. It doesn't have a big signal either, but Waco is a smaller town, smaller market. There's no KLBJ there." I said, "You could buy this station for a third the cost. If you fail, you haven't lost a whole lot of money, and there's that station." So he bought it, and I created the monster.
So what he's telling me is that he's the SOB that brought Tom Pauken to Waco.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry about it. I didn't know what he was going to do.
Oh, he was just awful, man.
But,
he was on my butt all the time.
But I liked Pauken. I mean, he was fine. He and I were both conservatives. I didn't foresee any of that stuff happening. Didn't even think about it. And he comes to Waco and does this constant editorializing against you.
Constant.
Basically mirroring what Charles Duncan was doing on Channel 8.
Mirroring Duncan and doing exactly what
and until
Robert
now,
Weathers
I wasn't
ordered.
aware that he was a guy that recruited Duncan.
Yeah. Yeah, we have that in sworn testimony. in Duncan's deposition when we were asking him, what got you onto this? Tom Parkin. Tom Parkin set up the meeting at the Ramada Inn with me and Ron Border and Bill Johnston.
Yeah, and since those days, I've had some contact with Tom Parkin, but it was never the same as before. And if Tom's listening to the podcast, Tom, you're fine, but probably was a mistake. And he ended up to do what he did on the editorials, but I don't know where Tom ended up, but I know that he eventually sold KRZI.
He did. He was already skidding by then, He was getting crossways with Karl Rove. He was getting crossways with the Bushes. And then when the Bushes took off and basically took over the state, Tom was just kind of left on his own. He didn't get any more
Tom had,
deals.
correct me if I'm wrong, and this is just out of fading memory because I don't think this is even in my book. It seems like he ran against Alan Steelman or Jim Maddox or somebody.
Oh, he ran against Maddox twice.
Okay, and
before
lost both
this,
times.
So no wonder he'd have been against me and what I was doing with Lucas because Maddox was with me and helping
he was
on
going into radio and leaving Dallas because things weren't working out politically. And you got to understand, I'm reading Killing Kennedy right now by Bill O'Reilly, and it's amazing to hear him write about how far right-wing conservative Dallas was in 1963.
Oh, yes, they were.
And I went to Dallas out of school, so I graduated in 72. I went to Dallas in late 72, took a job at WFAA, went to KRLD, and ended up at KAAM, which is now the Ticket.
Yeah.
1310.
Ainsworth has a lot to say about that.
And Dallas was still conservative.
Conservative and racist as can be.
Well, yeah, when you go back to the days of Kennedy.
They hated Kennedy.
And there were...
the police department hated Kennedy. And they had a slang term, and this was in Dallas and in Los Angeles. The police, if they wanted to refer to a black person over the radio, they said, I see 3 Democrats. Thank you for listening to the Vic Feazell Show podcast. We're a primary source podcast. We don't just read about it and then talk about it. We talk about people we've known, things we've done. We're a primary source podcast. Leave a review. Sign up for our email list. And go visit our store. We have a page on www.vicfeazell.com.